Hello, and welcome to another episode of What Makes You Shine. My name is Steph Lloyd. As a natural healthcare practitioner and coach, what makes me shine is to help others find their shine. In this show, I've gathered for you amazing people who do just that. So today, I'm privileged to speak to Nick Stone. Nick is a yoga teacher and breathwork facilitator. His passion is helping people to strip away layers of negative programming and behaviours through incorporating certain techniques such as working with the breath, mindset and movement in order to help them move back in the direction of true, healthier and happier version of themselves. Nick is based in Bournemouth, but he also works online. So hello, Nick.
Hey, how's it going, Steph? Thanks for having me on
Great,
again.
thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for telling us about your amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Pleasure. Yeah, it's nice to be on because it was what was it, a few months, well, back in the summer now, wasn't it, when we did our Nourish community with Rich. So it's cool
Yeah,
to come back on and do another spin on it.
yeah, about your amazing work. So tell us what makes you shine, Nick.
What makes me shine? Hopefully a few things. But yeah, I think for me anyway, what really I have an interest in and passion for, and it's developed over the past sort of really almost several years or so, is learning and understanding myself more and the journey path I've been on, understanding why it is I am the way I am, or certain things and certain traits, and looking at it from, is that more my true self over here, or is that me coming from a more survival ego state? And then really sort of learning tools and techniques along the way from more science-based to spiritual-based to sort of navigate through that and bring myself more from at times when I was in a more anxious, stressed out, over analyzing state into a more deeper understanding of who I am. And now, so what really sort of, I guess you could say, makes me shine and what excites me and drives me is how I can then work with people and see the traits in people that maybe I've stumbled on as well, and then how I can then pass that learning and messages and techniques I've learned along the way to help people move into a happier place.
That's amazing. That's so great that you can use your own learning and your own experience, because that's real wealth and value to others as well. So you incorporate this in your yoga and your breathwork practice, is that right?
Yeah, what in my own personal practice.
Or yeah, or sharing it with others.
Yeah, definitely. So depending on what the sort of situation is, what the individual or even like myself in my own practice needs, whether I call upon breath work, and breath work being working with the breath, though it's not just one technique, and there's a million and one sort of techniques out there, and we can sort of touch on that in a bit if you want. Or if it's literally doing a form of movement. I mean, movement is so good, and we live in such a lot of us can fall into the trap of living in a much more still sort of static life now with work and everything else going on. So yeah, it's then incorporating the breath work, the movement. In my case, it's more towards the asana, which is the yoga postures, or we call what in the West we call yoga, more so anyway. And then also, yeah, mindset and how that all plays in, how like, catching myself. So working on catching myself on what sort of thought process am I going down? Do I actually want to get on this one? And then what I need to do to sort of shift it into this direction. Not saying it always works perfectly well, but it's it's a good sort of set of instructions and techniques in order to sort of make that shift.
It's a practice, isn't it? It's a practice, and
Yeah.
the more we practice observing our thoughts and directing the thought to where we want the thought to be directed, the better we get at it. But yeah, it's never
Yeah, and I guess there's a reason why they call it a practice. So
yeah,
mhm.
absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about breath work. Some people might
Breath.
not know what breath work is. Obviously, we're all
Yeah,
breathing. What's the difference with your breathing?
yeah, and it's very true because I catch myself having a little laugh, and when I speak with some people, because I'm also sort of involved in construction as well, so I can be around a lot of sort of male different sort of energy, and then when I start talking about breath work, it's also like it's such a thing of Brett, you're going to teach me how to breathe. Like, I've been breathing my whole life. I can even do it when I'm sleeping. Like, cheers, mate, but I'm all right. And it's so true. Like, it's like, come on, man. Like, but there's, and I can't stress this enough. And when I started to learn the nuts and bolts and how we breathe and science behind it, it was just like a light bulb, and I was just hooked straight away. When we move from, there's such a difference from unconscious day-to-day breathing, automatic breathing, hence from our autonomic nervous system, which ticks on behind the scenes, to then conscious breathing, and then how we can actually influence, say, our rate, our rhythm, our depth, breathing high up into the chest, low down into the belly, fast, slow, and all these different sort of layers and components you can add on to your breath, and then how this can literally change all sorts of signals going around the body, and different hormones are secreted, and we can rev ourselves up, we can calm ourselves right down, or we can just find balance, because breathing is, well, like what we're sort of briefly, we know anyway, but when you actually really sort of embody that information, is we can go without food and water for quite some time, really. But breathing, for most people, the average sort of person, if you don't breathe for whatever reason in a couple of minutes or 3 minutes, the chances are you're gonna either have brain damage or you're gonna die. And for that reason, it's so important. It almost gets to think of it as priority, with the mind-body connection through the nervous system. Your breathing, your respiratory system gets priority. So for that, it's so sensitive. And the majority of the messages actually come from the body up to the brain. So then when you understand this, you can then actually manipulate how your body is moving and breathing, depending on what is your desired outcome. So yeah, like I said, then you can breathe in a way, if you want to naturally get a bit more energy and a bit more focus in the morning, or you're feeling stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed, you can breathe in a way that just slows you right down. Or you can breathe in this way where it's around 5 to 6 breaths a minute, and it creates this, like, research has now caught up with what has been taught for thousands of years on all corners of the planet. The effects it can do in this thing called coherent breathing, where your heart and your brain start to sync. It harmonizes all of your major bodily systems and functions, and you move into like this sort of flow state. And it's just incredible. It's so simple, but it's so incredible, and there's so much to it that you just sort of pass it.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I mean, very, very sorry to, I just say, like, because the first thing that really hooked me onto it was when I learned, when I breathe in, your heart actually speeds up a little bit. And this is part of your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight. Yeah. It's your like safety mechanism kind of thing. It revs you up, mobilizes you, gets you ready for being like active. And then when you breathe out, your heart slows down a little bit. And this is the opposite. It's your relaxation response. So simply just playing with the inhale or the exhale, you can shift into an energized state, or you can shift into a more calm and relaxed state. And when I understood that, it took it from, oh, this is just me thinking in my head about, oh, breathing can do this and this, to actually a more sort of objective thing that can be like studied and quantified, And then it gave me more sort of confidence in it. Coming from a yoga background, I was more into the pranayama and not really bothered about the science. And then as I then went further down the journey of conscious breathing, and then trained in other modalities, it sort of just builds the confidence and understanding of how much impact you can have.
Huge impact. I mean, I was lucky. I hope that's okay for me to say that we did a breath work the other day together, and it really was quite amazing, and this, you do all this breathing, and then there's the holding of breath, where you were saying, that the brain should think that it's about to get in trouble. If we've got no air, this is trouble. But this is completely the opposite. This is the blissful state. This is the bit that suddenly you're able to hold your breath in a complete peaceful state.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. And then yeah, that's a good point we brought that up, because there's breathing techniques that work more in the short term. Yeah, I'm stressed, I need to calm down, I need to go to sleep, I can't stop my brain thinking. But then you can do other techniques. So you could do that technique for say 5-10 minutes, yeah, and you're going to feel something that's going to help. Or you can do what we did, where you do a whole session where you're doing a different type of breathing for anywhere up to half an hour to an hour, and it takes you on this whole other journey where you can actually then bypass the conscious sort of ego analytical side of the brain, and you can move into the sort of the areas at the back that you don't always want to go to, or you're unaware of, in the unconscious part of the brain. And that's really sort of ignited my passion as well, more and more. Because it's how you then start to pull out certain traumas that you're maybe unaware you've even got. So, but just to bring it back to the breath retention, then holding your breath. Yeah, it's people think, oh, is it just like again, before I was educated, like a lot of things, you think, is it just like a party trick? You know, I can hold my breath, cool. And you see, and free divers obviously do this technique, or a degree of this technique, so they can hold their breath for long periods of time. But actually, what sort of goes on in the body when you are holding your breath, yeah, the stillness and the peace that can come with it is amazing. But just the fact that you can, like, growth hormones can be released, stem cell production can be increased, red blood cells, the actual count increases, even something that we wouldn't ever assume, but the delivery of the red blood cells, the oxygen in the red blood cells, is then actually released into, is increased in the release into the actual body, into the cells. For a lot of us, we don't realize, we think, oh yeah, I'm just breathing in that oxygen, but that's only part of the story, you know. You can oxygenate your blood as much as you want, but then how well does the red blood cells release the oxygen into the cells to then repair and nourish and rejuvenate? And this is where breath holds, done in a controlled, safe way, can literally take you to a whole nother dimension of health and mindset and perspective change and everything.
Yes, and that really needs to be done with a facilitator like yourself, where you are guided and where you are with somebody, right? Something like that is more important to be with.
Yeah, correct. That's a good point. Something more on that level is always recommended to do it with like a facilitator that can keep an eye on how it is you are breathing. You don't get yourself into trouble necessarily. Or you're not over breathing. If you over breathe and push too much, you can just bring in extra cramping in the body that isn't really necessary.
Yeah.
A degree of that happens anyway. But yeah, it's good. I mean, for example, you can do shorter stints. There's and a little quick fix for me sometimes. Wim Hof, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Wim Hof by now, but he's a he teaches about breath work, cold exposure, and he's like amazed science on every level, and he has this lovely spiritual aspect to him as well. But he's got a lot of stuff on YouTube, and there's an 11-minute session of his where it's this quicker breathing. It's about 30 odd breaths, and then it's a minute breath hold, and then there's a minute and a half breath hold, and another minute and a half. And you can knock that out in 10-15 minutes, and you're not really going to get yourself in any sort of trouble there.
No, that sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be mindful. You know, people that I would never suggest somebody that's pregnant would do this, because even though there's a lot of studies now showing that it isn't really a problem, it's not. I would say have fun with other type of more passive breath work.
As I said, there's so many different breaths, isn't there? You don't have to push quite so hard. And you were saying about maybe what what breath would you recommend for going to sleep? You were saying that earlier. That'd be a great one for people to have under their belt.
Yeah, so there's a very simple one, and then you can, like I say, you can build layers onto it. But very simply, knowing how the heart works on the inhale and the exhale, breathing in through the nose, and then a long extended exhale through the mouth. That after a few rounds can shift you quite nicely. Generally speaking, you want to be breathing in through the nose. It just helps to slow the breath down. It helps to sort of balance the carbon dioxide, CO2 levels in the blood, which also acts as something called a vasodilator, which sort of to expand the blood vessels. So that will then reduce the blood pressure and help to just slow things down. So that's a good one. But even what one I sort of tell quite a lot of people about is the 4-4-6-2 ratio.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, I love that one too. That's one of my favorite too.
Yeah. And that's a good one. That it's funny, even before I started really diving down the rabbit hole of breath work, before I'd sit down to do a bit of just tuning in, I would naturally sort of shift towards a form of box breathing. And I could feel as I'd exhale, like after a hold, this sort of shift in energy drop through me. And then when you actually learn it down the line, it's amazing how you sort of intuitively almost find it yourself. But yeah, just for anybody listening, this is a good one for sort of stress, anxiety, overwhelm. If you in through the nose for a count of 4, then you hold at the top for a count of 4, and then you exhale for a slow count of 6, and then hold for a count of 2. And you can breathe out through the nose or through the mouth. When we breathe out through the mouth, it tends to have more of a deeper, visceral, like sort of release, like a sigh. And sighing and being a bit vocal is also a good thing. Yeah, that would be a good one, I'd say. I like that one.
Yeah, that's an amazing one. That's really helpful. Thanks. And so tell us a little bit more about your sessions. What happens in your session? You do them online and face-to-face, one-to-one, as well as groups, right?
Yeah. So yeah, just starting sort of online really ideally now. And so it'll be online and group sessions actually here in this space where I'm at now, which I call the cabin. And then looking to actually get another space, but in and around the Bournemouth area is where you'll sort of find me at the moment. But yeah, one-on-one sessions, and that would be then dependent on the individual in front of me. It all depends on what it is they're coming to me for. Are they looking for, it might just be mobility, for example. I've got a guy that I'm starting to, well, we're just talking now. I'm going to start doing sessions soon. That's just looking at building his mobility back after he's been through some quite intense surgery, and then to get snowboarding again. So that'll be more focused around that. But of course, where the breath is so important is that can help to actually relieve tension in the muscles, and also then shift mindset as well. We can work on a slightly more deeper level of sort of where he's thinking he wants to go. So he's having a bit of a change in horizon, should we say, where he's going with things. So yeah, it's all dependent on the person, really. Something called functional breathing. Always would check to see how the person is breathing unconsciously. So a little trick of keeping them sort of distracted while you're assessing how they're breathing, because that can tell so much of your health of your nervous system, of the mind and body. And then so it would be anything from, we could work with just small little techniques that you can implement throughout the day, because that's it. It's like we haven't always got time to do a full-on hour and a half session. They're amazing and they're very well needed, but it's also how we can then incorporate them into our day-to-day life. Let's take a classic scenario you'll be in. Do we need to feel more energy? Do we need to feel more chill? Do we just want to feel balanced, where we can access both hemispheres of the brain as much as we can, and just for our day-to-day activities? Yeah, it's sort of, it can be, it is customized as much as it needs to be.
That's, yeah, but that's the beauty, I suppose, of the one-to-one. And And what about your group sessions? So if somebody's never done breath work, can they come? Can they come and have a look and be curious about trying it out?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Like whether you've done it before or not, everyone is always welcome. And it will just be a case of, okay, cool, this is your first time. Maybe we'll just keep an extra on you and just keep you breathing at a certain rate. But yeah, it's open to everyone. Like I say, there's certain techniques. Breath work is for everyone, and there's such an array of different techniques out there. It all depends on the individual. So if I'm doing a group and I know that somebody is pregnant, for example, and they've come along, depending on the session, I'd then get them doing something else. It all depends on the theme, what we're working towards. Yeah, and just sort of navigating through that, really.
And I think it's such, and I've done breath work quite a few times now with different facilitators, and you just don't know what you're going to get on the day. The body's going to do what the body wants to do, and you know, you might feel you are having a really great day, and then you're going to have lots of resistance doing the breath work, or you know, you might find out it goes really easily. It's, you know, your subconscious will speak up whether you want to hear it or not.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, you don't know. I remember, just to add to sort of touch on what you're saying. I remember I was doing a more of a deeper breathwork session where I was working more on sort of they call it like the inner child, but you know, trauma or not so positive experiences from our younger years. And I was thinking, yeah, I think I went in there a bit like, cool, yeah, let's see what happens sort of thing, and not really feeling anything. And don't get me wrong, went through the sort of resistant part at the start, which you tend to always do in the more connected breathwork sessions. And then I broke through to the more nicer bit at the end. And then it was right at the end, I then just started welling up and just having this full-on release, just laying there like on my side, just crying, seeing myself when I was younger, or understanding maybe there's traits in me or that I've been working on that don't serve me so well, but they've stemmed from experiences I've had, you know, as a young boy, and then had this sort of switched into this survival mode and come out more from a sort of insecure, ego-driven sort of part. And I remember coming out of it like, wow, I was not expecting that in the slightest. And I just felt a ton lighter. And it just helps to just shed off some layers. It helps to just twist and release the nozzle of some pressure. And it's fascinating stuff.
It's so incredible. It really is. And like you say, where it comes from nowhere, like everything was going all good, and suddenly this this old layer comes out, and you know, and releases it. But it's very, very, very beautiful. So where can we find you?
Where can you find me? So really online, if you want to get in touch online, it would be on the website, nickstoneofficial.com, or at the moment on my Instagram, Nick Stone Yoga, or email address. I've got email address going on, nickstoneyoga@gmail.com. So one of those platforms.
Yeah.
But yeah, currently operating within the Bournemouth region. But yeah, and working online. So there's various ways to get in touch and work together.
Yeah. So I'll pop all these links in the comments underneath, so we can find you, or you can contact me and I'll put you in touch with Nick. But yeah, it's an amazing work. And do you want to tell us, so do you incorporate your yoga in the breath work? How do you do that?
So I incorporate movement at the start. It all depends on how long the session would be. But you can have, so primarily when people think about yoga and the breathing associated with yoga, it would be the practice of pranayama, which is one of the most ancient, if not the most ancient, breathing practice known. And so there's always, and you do a lot of, through the actual yoga postures, you are doing it's controlled breathing, for the majority of it anyway. And so then you would be, if it was a more yoga style session, then you would then be doing your sort of more of your steady in and out coherent style breathing. You can do an energizing breath at the start. Or if we're shifting more to an actual deeper exploration of who you are, and you fancy journeying a little bit further into some areas of the mind you don't go to, then it would be focused more on just that type of style breathwork itself. But I always like to start with general basic movement. I mean, movement is so good just to get the sort of energy in the body warmed up, but also just to, if you think about it, certain type of movement just to get the muscles of what you use breathing going, your intercostal muscles in the ribs, your diaphragm, and so on, and the spine. We can hold so much tension along the spine. Then I would incorporate movement in that, just so when we move into the breath work, we've sort of opened and warmed up the breathing areas and centers of the body, so we can breathe as best as we can. It's like anything. You want to warm up the body and stretch before you exercise. You want to warm up the body and stretch before you breathe. And for me, I try and sort of look at things through, not all the time, but a lot of the time, through like the lens of a nervous system, for example. And if you think we've got, and the reason I'm talking about this is in relation to the movement, is you think we live in a world that can be so stimulating on our mind, on our nervous system. So back in the day when we were living out on the plains and we were scanning for predators, and that's what our fight or flight system really was. It was used in a more healthier way. It was stimulated when it needed to be. When we then got out the situation, we fighted or we flighted, or even the freeze. When we become so overwhelmed, we just sort of drop dead and pretend we're dead, and hopefully the predator leaves us. But if you now bring that into today's world, we are very sophisticated, but we still have this old ancestral wiring, part of how the brain works. And instead of the tiger in the room or whatever the predator was, we now have smartphones pinging all the time. We have busy traffic. We have, self-image worries. We have financial worries. We have all these different forms of stimulation in our environment. But we also live in a much more, slower, I say slower pace on a physical level. Where we're sitting at a desk, or
it's safer sedentary, isn't it? I suppose.
Sedentary, exactly. Yeah, that's the word. So we're not allowing our body to move and process these stress hormones. So it's so vital, I feel, and it is. We always feel good after a form of movement, and everybody will have a slightly different form, but as long as it's more of an active style, yang style type of movement, we can then process these sort of and burn off these hormones of stress, and also help to release maybe a not so pleasant experience that we didn't release because we thought it's not safe to. So we hold on to that. But by incorporating the movement helps to actually, in a somatic way with the body, help to like release that and get rid of that, that's why I love to incorporate the movement with the breath. And then with that, it then helps to improve our mindset. Because sometimes just trying to sit still and think good thoughts can be quite hard. But there's like another way around you can do it. It's like we can can't always go maybe straight to the mind, so we can go indirectly through the body,
Yeah. Amazing. I love how you've brought all your passions together and just put it into one big, wonderful program for us. So
Thank
so
you.
grateful for this.
Oh, you're
And
very
I
welcome.
really look forward to my next breathwork session. I'm
Yeah,
totally addicted to it now. I love it. It's so good.
amazing.
So everybody, if you've got any question, don't hesitate to contact me, or I'll put you in touch directly, or you can get in touch directly with Nick. And thank you very much for listening. Thanks for coming, Nick. If you want to listen to more about what makes you shine and loads of amazing people, subscribe to my channel, and I'll have lots more amazing people out here to talk to you. So Nick, I can't thank you enough for being with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Steph. I really appreciate it.
And I look forward to seeing you not on the screen.
Yeah, amazing.
Have a lovely day. Take care.
See you later, guys.
Bye. Thank you.